crisis is unquestionably growing more and more acute. And you have equated this world crisis to a crisis in man's consciousness. Can you explain or share with me what you mean by that?
I think it's fairly clear. The psychological content of the consciousness of man is almost universal. The content of one's consciousness is greatly similar to all other consciousness of mankind. There, in that consciousness, man suffers, goes through a great deal of agony, conflict, and depression and elation. He has innumerable beliefs, great many images about himself and about others. There is fear and the pursuit of pleasure and various types of religious divisions with their superstitions, illusions, saviors, and all that. That's the content of one's consciousness, which is really the content of all of humanity. Because all humanity, whether it is in the East or Middle East, or in the Far West, or in Africa, Russia, or wherever it is, human beings go through this crisis in this consciousness.
How do we see the crisis? How do we? I'm still not clear of the relationship between the crisis of in our consciousness and what we see.
That's fairly clear, isn't it? Really, we want order outside in the world, politically, religiously, economically, socially. In our relationship with each other, we want order. We want some peace. We want some understanding. And if the inward psychological state is not orderly, not conflicting, not contradicting, if that state in consciousness is quiet, steady, clear, then you can bring about order in the world. Now what we are trying to do is try to bring order legislatively, nationally, and so on, order out there in the world, which has been proved over and over again that totally brings about disorder. That's why we are saying, I'm saying, that without inward order, that is, inward order in consciousness, which is in a mess, which is in a contradiction, without bringing about order inwardly, psychologically, you cannot possibly have order outward. And the crisis is there. Within the crisis, national, economic, social, and so on. The crisis is not out there. The crisis is really inward. And we are unwilling to face that.
You have said oftentimes that it is absolutely essential that man change radically. And yet for centuries, man has continued in the same old patterns, the same old traditions, the same old ways. What are the consequences? What are the consequences if he does not change?
The consequences are very clear. Consequences are war. Consequences are constant wars throughout the world. I do not know if you realize that for the last 5,000 years, practically every year there's been a war. Killing each other, human beings killing each other. And the accumulation of armament, technological advancement, and the scientists, and the nationalists, and the religious people who are divided are sustaining this mad accumulation of the things that are necessary for war. It's so obvious. Any fool can see this.
We have gone on without destroying ourselves so far.
But now,
is our time running out? How acute do you see?
But now it's becoming more and more dangerous.
How so?
The nuclear war, the emphasis of all the poor nations as well as the rich nations on building up armaments. One day there'll be a clash, inevitably. It's the job of the generals and the politicians to prepare for war, to plan for war. That's their job. And so they're maintaining it. That's a class by themselves. I wonder why human beings throughout the world don't see this simple fact that you cannot possibly have peace on earth if you are nationalistically divided. Nationalism is merely the glorification of tribalism. And every politician right throughout the world maintains this tribalism, this division. This has been the history of mankind. And nobody has applied his mind and said, let us stop all this. The scientists are sustaining it. The so-called religious people are sustaining it. Of course, the politicians, it's their job to keep everybody fighting each other.
What we were saying is that for centuries our daily lives have been filled with fear, tremendous suffering, and yet none of these have been sufficient for us to bring about a change. Why?
I'm not being personal, sir, but you've heard all this. You as a human being who's been through probably a great deal of anxiety, suffering, insecurity, and confusion. Why don't you change? If each one of us asked that question, not verbally or merely intellectually as an entertainment, but ask that question more seriously and deeply. What's your answer? What's your answer to this problem that human beings have lived this way for millennia upon millennia? Why haven't they changed? Why haven't you, who are listening now, why haven't you changed? You know, if you don't change, what's the consequences are? You'll be nationalistic, you'll be tribal, insular, isolated, and therefore having no relationship globally, fighting, building up more and more armaments, destroy each other. Now, why don't you, if you're at all serious in this matter, why don't you ask yourself that question? Why am I, a human being, who have been through all this, why haven't I changed? What would be your answer?